Hello, hello, everyone. See everyone piling in. Happy holiday season. Merry Christmas, if that's your thing. I try to address Christmassy today. So as you're coming in, if you would put your name, your company, your role, and what's the best gift that you've ever been given. Doesn't have to be Christmas, can be birthday, can be any holiday. Want to see what people have gotten in the past. I got my first tree going here, my first Christmas tree ever, which was a whole ordeal. So name, I think that trying to see if the chat is disabled. Okay, how do I enable the chat? Anyone know how to do that? This is probably not the time to be doing that. Okay, chat. Okay, answered. Okay, I only see questions, but the chat is disabled for some reason. That stinks. Okay, I am gonna need to figure that out for future webinars. Okay, so you'll have to bump in the Q&A, unfortunately, for this one, apparently. So, oh no, let me bring up the chat. Hosts and panelists can chat with, oh, here we go. Everyone, look at me, I figured this out on the fly. Okay, try now. Try and jump in the chat and say anything. Yes. Oh my gosh. That's pretty cool. Okay, so name, role, company, and what is the best gift that you've ever been given? Doesn't have to be Christmas, can be birthday, can be the best gift that you've ever been given. And if you want to, I would love it if you would put in there why you showed up today. Why did you show up to this webinar today, so that I make sure that I get a good marker on it. Let's see what everyone's got. What kind of Christmas gifts that you've gotten. I actually, true story, my favorite Christmas gift, and I used to be really, really bad about this, meaning I would try to find out what my parents were giving me every single year. I was pretty diagnostic about it. Set of golf clubs. Nice, Eric. Me and you are not the same person. I don't even know how to golf. I actually used to go to the driving range when I was mad and use the big club. I don't even know what it's called, but I call it the Ace Club. And I just hit the ball as far as I could go. But my best Christmas, the best Christmas present that I ever got was my parents led me to believe that it wasn't this, because they told me, like, hey, we're thinking of giving you half of this, Christmas Eve and the other half the day of. So I thought, oh, it can't be this, but it actually was this. They gave me a dog. And that was the best Christmas gift that I've ever gotten. Her name was Scout. I named her after the book To Kill a Mockingbird, and I named her Cow Cow for short. Best gift was my son. Okay, and Bose noise canceling headphones. That's a pretty pragmatic gift, Danny. Pretty pragmatic gift. Okay, well, we're going to jump in here into the content. So it looks like I'm seeing a lot of pain versus problem versus challenges. The difference between all of those is what y'all want to cover. So I'm going to encourage you as much as possible to ask as many questions as you can. And these can be any questions, whether that be prospecting, whether that be cold email, whether that be, any question that you have around prospecting or driving more pipeline into close and close one conversion. Sky's the limit. So I would beg y'all not to leave me up here on the soapbox alone in Monologueville. But yeah, if you have any questions, I would please put them in the chat that I've now enabled, and I'll get to as many of them as I can. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in here into the deck. We've got quite a bit of content that we're going to go through today. Just as an FYI, yes, the recording will be sent out to attendees. And thank you, Carl. Yes, we'll be sending out the recording to attendees, and I'll also be sending the deck. Just full disclosure, this is one of 3 webinars we're going to be doing in December. So they're all on pretty meaty concepts. All three of them are assets. They're all in, if you go to flipthescript.co and click written, there are 3 new assets in there. So we're going to cover one today, which is pain versus problem, and the asset number 1. But if anyone hasn't downloaded the asset, if you go to flipthescript.co, click on written, and then click on the 5 different types of selling and 11 problems to sell based on. But I'm going to go ahead and kick off here so that I can try to manage to stay on time, which is not my forte. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if you can or can't see it, but we're going to kick off for number 1 today, which is going to be the difference between pain and problem, the 5 different types of selling core, what they're centric to, the litmus test that you can know that you are based on each one, because I think it's pretty surprising. And then we're going to spend the lion's share of the time on the 11 different problems that you can solve. All problems aren't created equal, in my opinion, and you're going to see some more than you're going to see others on the selling floor. But there's a heavy implication to both prospecting and selling throughout the course of this webinar. So I want to first start by covering the 5 different types of selling. I actually had my nieces and nephews do a little skit on this for the tour date in Dallas. But there's 5 essentially types of selling, and I'm going to define the type of selling as what you're basing it on. Like what you're centering the conversation around whenever you're in your first meeting, and this is going to be for discovery, for instance. So the 5 different types of selling, the first one's going to be product centric. This is pretty simple. You're selling based on your products. So, this is the patient walks into the doctor's office and the doctor doesn't ask any questions and basically just starts describing the different medications at the hope and goal that you would be likely to buy them more. Sounds pretty crazy, but that would be the instance of product-centric selling. And this is normally going to be product-centric selling is going to happen specifically if you're an enterprise and you sell multiple different products and multiple different buyers. I've worked with companies that sell anywhere from, I had one that sold 79 products. I had one that sold 142 products, but this is essentially spending your discovery time by talking all about your product and hope that you're talking about it in an advantageous way enough that the buyer will want to buy. Feature-centric selling is going to be number 2. And this is very similar to product-centric selling, but you are anchoring in on the different features of the product, the products that you're selling. So this is the same situation of patient walks into the doctor's office and the doctor doesn't ask any questions and basically starts talking about the different features of the medications in hopes that the patient will want to buy the medication. They'll have more encouragement to do that. So this is specifically going to be for SMB or mid-market companies. If you only sell 1 or 2 core products, then I'm going to see a lot of feature-centric selling on the ground. The third and arguably one of the most prevalent types of selling is going to be benefit-centric selling. And this is your selling by way of describing general upsides, generic upsides. And this is what I think by and large the sales community knows that they shouldn't be, or cerebrally knows that they shouldn't be selling based on products or features or benefits. But the distinction between benefits and problems that someone would want to solve is a benefit is just a generic upside, in general. It has nothing to do with your buyer necessarily. And this is, a patient walks into the doctor's office and essentially the doctor just starts talking about generic upsides of the medications in hopes that this will get the patient to be more likely to buy the medication. So there's really 2 generic upsides that everyone wants more of, that no one has enough of, that I see people talk about a lot. Let's see if anyone can guess. What are the 2 things, if you jump in the chat, what are the 2 things that you think most buyers, regardless of their buyer persona, want more of that they don't have enough of? And let's see if anyone's going to get the answer here. But okay, now I can't even show chat previews. Now I can't even see the chat. Oh my gosh, this is like my biggest nightmare. Okay, I can't even see the chat now. This is terrible. Maybe put it in the Q&A. Go back to the Q&A. You can see the chat. I can't see the chat. But the two benefits that I see, or the two things that I think people, generically speaking, want to see more of that they don't have enough of is normally going to be time and money. You know, so it's save time, save money, more time, more money, you know, not leaving resources on the table, not leaving money on the table, a lack of revenue. But this is essentially, it's all about the generic upsides of someone using your product that you're going to see. The fourth type here, and this is going to be pain-centric selling. And pain-centric, yep, Eric already got it, time and money. Pain-centric selling is going to be that you're anchoring and making the conversation about pain only. So in this instance, the patient is going to walk into the doctor's office and the doctor actually starts to ask questions this time. Good doc. But they're going to ask some questions around pain only. You know, what pain are you experiencing? You know, the patient's going to tell, oh, my arm hurts. How long has it been hurting? It's been hurting for 3 weeks. You know, what have you tried to do? What's the impact of that pain? And they have to self-diagnose at that point. And they're like, well, I guess, you know, I can't play ball with my son. And they're like, what's the son's name? Timmy. And they're trying to get you to describe the pain at the goal of getting you to talk about that pain so that the patient feels like they should buy more. But it's pain questions only. Those are the only types of questions you're gonna be asking. Have you tried to solve for this before? Yes. Did that work? No, it didn't work. But it's trying to get the buyer to basically, prospective buyer or patient, to talk about the generic pains or the pains that they're seeing, to hope that that gets the person to talk about the pain enough to where they want to do something about it enough. But in that type of selling, there's going to be one thing that you're missing. And I want to see if y'all could jump in the Q&A, because for some reason I can't bring up the chat. But if you jump in the Q&A and put your guess in there, you're asking pain questions, you know, how long it's hurt, you know, what hurts, you know, the self-diagnosed impact of that hurt, but what do you not know in this case scenario? There's a main glaring hole that you don't know if you're asking pain-centric questions only. Let's see if anyone can guess it. I'll give you a couple seconds. Yep, Ryan already got it. Brilliant. You don't know what caused the pain. So if I'm stopping at pain questions only, pain is subjective in nature, and the buyer already knows about pain. That's the definition of it. So if I stop there, then I don't know. One of the examples of things that I don't know, there's quite a few, is what caused the pain. So I know that something hurts, but I'm not sure at this point what caused it. And this is probably the most damaging, in my opinion, type of selling, because it's on the way to proper selling and actually helping your buyer, but it falls short quite a bit. And then the last type of selling is going to be problem-centric selling. This is anchoring yourself around finding the problems that your buyer, prospective buyer, knows about and doesn't know about, that they want to solve. So you're going to have to acquire quite a bit of more information at this point to be able to problem-centric sell. We're going to go into the differences in just a moment. But problem-centric selling is anchoring yourself around the problems that your buyer wants to solve. In some cases, that's going to be to alleviate the current pain in the present, but not in all cases. And even if you do know that it's pain, you don't know what caused it. And you don't know all the things that your buyer doesn't know. So I'm going to go into the litmus tests really quickly here, because I think these were valuable, at least to me. Most people know that they shouldn't product, feature, benefit-centric sell, but they don't know that they're doing it, in my experience. At least I didn't. So product-centric selling, couple litmus tests that you can walk away with to know if you are product-centric selling is, the first one is that you're describing your products in your first discovery call. So discovery should be anchored around you finding out information about your buyer, not to help you necessarily sell, but helping you ascertain information to help you diagnose what's happening and how you can change that situation so you can solve or solve for the problem. So discovery should be, so to speak, a rat race to find the information that you need. So the biggest thing that you can do in this case scenario is to just shift your mindset. Shift your mindset of the job in the room is for me to be able to diagnose what's going on. So I need to ask the questions around that. So if you're describing your products on your first discovery call, the vast majority of your conversation in your demo consists of you just describing your products with no actual hook to how that helps the buyer solve a problem that you know that they have. When you're describing your products, you have no tie. That's what I covered in number 3. And another litmus test is your company value props, generally speaking, are the same value props for every prospective buyer, regardless of the role, regardless of the situation, regardless of the segment. If you have like generic value props that you're anchoring in, if your demos are very, very consistently the same, then it's a good litmus test that you are product-centric selling. So another litmus test that I didn't put in here is essentially if within discovery, if you are finding that you only need a couple of minutes to do discovery, that you can do it really quickly, it's usually a good litmus test that you're product-centric selling. You know, so discovery should be anchored around, I have to find out a lot of information to be able to diagnose correctly, to be able to prescribe correctly. So a doctor can't prescribe and diagnose, you know, within under a minute or under 5 minutes even. They have to find out quite a bit of information to figure out what's causing it, you know, so that they're able to prescribe them the right solution. So feature-centric selling, some litmus tests that you're doing that is if you were to ask a question internally, this is a good litmus test. On a scale of 1 to 10, how different are the value props to each different buyer persona on what we do? So for instance, I sell to sales leaders, I sell to SDR leaders, I sell to sales enablement, I sell to sales operations, I sell to revenue leaders. And if my value props were the same for each one of those, you know, if it's anything over, I would say over, yeah, a 3 or a 4, that they're the same, then it's a good litmus test that you're feature or product-centric selling. You know, so each buyer persona is going to, by definition, have different metrics that they're generally speaking after achieving. So a great example of this is SDR leaders are typically metriced on booked meetings or qualified meetings, sometimes influence pipeline, you know, a couple of different things in there, but generally speaking, booked meetings. And sales leaders and sales reps are, you know, full cycle, or whether that's specifically an AE without having pipeline creation under their belt, are markered on close one revenue. So they're going to look at a list of meetings. If there's a list of 20 meetings that were booked, the SDR leader, you know, in a day, let's say the SDR leader is going to say, this is a great day. But the AE leader is going to look at that and they're going to start to ask a couple questions about these meetings. How quality are they? You know, are they, you know, what type of role, what type of company, you know, was put into this? Is this someone who actually has a need? Do they have buyer intent? What's their timeline? The reason they're doing that is because they have a different goal. They're goaled on, does this close? Whereas an SDR leader is just goaled on, was this qualified and did this go across the line? So if your value props, generally speaking, on a scale of 1 to 10 or anything over a 3 in terms of how similar they are, then it's a good litmus test that you're feature-centric selling. The second one here, the buyer persona portion of your onboarding, I see this all the time for your company, was only 5 to 10% of your onboarding was around the actual buyer personas. You know, you have this nice slide or nice couple of slides that are around like, hey, these are the buyer personas, this is generally what they're after, but the lion's share of the training was on products, internal processes, you know, different tech that you're using, you know, that if your product training was more than your feature release training is more than your buyer persona training, then it's a good litmus test that you're feature-centric selling. And then the last one here, every time you do an internal training, every time you release a feature, you have to do an internal training where you do a mock pitch for that new feature. And the mock pitch is not in regard to what buyer persona is in the room. That's another metric that our litmus test of your future-centric selling. Got to speed up here. Benefit-centric selling. Here's a couple of litmus tests. This again is a tricky one. Most people don't know they're doing it. But if you're saying anything like, we help companies blank, save time, save money, more money, waste time, waste money, leave revenue on the table. You know, we help companies book more meetings. This is a great example. We help companies book more meetings. That's not a problem. A problem is if they have a quota of 10 booked meetings and their reps haven't been able. They've been at 5 meetings per month, for instance. That's an example of something that could be a problem. So the differences here is there are going to be generic upsides around using the product. You know, so great example for medications. They could say, if you take this medication, kind of a side effect is you might lose some weight, makes you less hungry. So these are just generic upsides to the person. When you're asked how you differentiate, if you list the same differentiators between you and your competitors, or you don't ask questions before you list those differentiators, or they aren't framed around the unique situation that the person, like point blank, if you're at a conference and someone comes up to you and they say, how do you differentiate from blank? And you answer them, it means you're benefit-centric selling. Best case scenario, because it means that you're giving generic upsides of what you're doing. You know, so typically, like the punchline is, you don't even know what problem the person's trying to solve. So how on earth could you know what features, products that the person would need to solve their problem, where you differentiate, you know, with a different competitor? So these are all good litmus tests. You don't know what your buyer personas are metriced on. So I'd make a list in my head mentally. You don't have to come in the Q&A and come off mute. But if you can't right now, without looking at your computer, name your 5 different buyer personas, and in your head know the lagging indicators that they're metric to drive, like booked meetings, or for marketers, MQLs, you know, or for CSMs, let's say, you know, renewal or upsell or cross-sell or churn. For HR, it's like ENPS score or employee churn. If you don't know those indicators, it's a good litmus test or question mark to you on, am I benefit-centric selling? So I would also be after knowing the leading indicators. What would this buyer change typically to get to that lagging indicator? So if I'm, you know, metriced on booked meetings, one of the indicators, leading indicators that I'm going to change is, it could be email quality or email quantity, or the time of day that I'm sending those out, or is it email or a call, or what type of people, you know, what type of role am I sending those out to? Those are leading indicators that I would change to ultimately change my lagging indicator. And if the last one here, if you don't know the common struggles that your buyer personas run into, then it's a good litmus test that your buyer persona or your benefit-centric selling. So the reason why Corporate Bro is funny, can be funny, is because he knows the struggles that salespeople run into. So he makes videos about them. So if you couldn't make those same types of videos, a little more appropriate, but same types of videos for your different buyer personas, then it's a great marker to you that you are benefit-centric selling, unfortunately. So we're going to keep moving here. Pain-centric selling. Some litmus tests here. You ask pain questions standalone. You hunt for their pain, but not what's causing the pain. So if someone mentions like, oh, well, you know, the pain is quota attainment, and you don't ask a certain amount of questions. If someone walks in the door and says like, hey, you know, I'm not hitting quota, our quota is 10 meetings per month, or quota is whatever, 100K ARR monthly, or sorry, MRR, and we're only hitting 50K MRR on average. If I don't ask the questions as to why, and not asking them what's causing this, but I have to ask a certain amount of questions to know what I think is causing it. It could be a number of things. It could be their email deliverability. It could be that the quality of their emails isn't high. Could be that they're sending really high quality emails, but they're not enough. Could be the time of day that they're sending them. Like on average, I see most reps send emails on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday morning from 8 to 10 a.m. And the best hit times are Wednesday, Thursday, Friday afternoon from 2 to 6 p.m. Or they make cold calls on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday morning at that time. So they could be thinking it's all about email quality, but it actually is about the time of day that they're making those, that they're sending those emails and making those calls. So if I'm not asking a certain amount of questions to uncover that, it's a good metric that I'm pain-centric selling. Another one, when the prospect comes in and they say they need something, this is very common. They come in, they say, I want blank, or I need blank. All that is they have self-diagnosed their condition. They self-diagnose what they think the root cause is. They have self-prognosed what they think the impact will be to them if they don't change it. And they have self-prescribed themselves a medication that they think that they need. That's all fine and good. The problem with that is that, statistically speaking, from the medical field, 90% of the time, they're going to be wrong. So buyers, by and large, are trained at this point. Gartner pointed out a stat that 87% of buyers don't want a seller involved, whether that be they purchase in purchasing an enterprise software solution or a stick of gum. And if I had to guess why, it's not because they don't want additional expertise that they don't have. It's that they don't think, in their experience, that you as a seller possess it. They don't think they're going to learn anything on that call that they didn't know about themselves in specific that is hurting them they didn't know. So when a prospect says they need something, I mean, your red flag should all go off. Maybe they're right, but usually you're going to see that they're incorrect. So I actually went into a couple doctor's appointments to prep for this presentation and this content. And I went into one of the doctors, and I just went into a doctor's appointment to ask them how they ask questions. And I went in, and the first doctor, I was like, okay. He was like, why are you here today? I was like, I actually need to understand how you ask questions to diagnose. And he's like, oh boy. I was like, okay. So first he was like, so what's wrong with you? I'm like, well, that's a whole ball of wax that we do not have time to diagnose. I was like, okay, so when people come in the office, how often do they come in? Why do they come in? He's like, well, 98% of the time it's going to be because of a symptom that they're seeing. It's going to be because of pain. I'm like, got it. Okay, so out of the times they come in the office, how often have they self-diagnosed? He's like, thanks to WebMD, 95. I'm like, okay, a little bit of heat behind that. I'm like, okay, so if they've self-diagnosed, percentage-wise, how often are they incorrect? He's like, can I be real with you? 90% of the time they're incorrect on what they thought the root cause was. So if your prospect says like, hey, I need something, if you don't, it's not challenging them. It's challenging them by understanding for yourself what you think that the diagnosis is. And there should be a difference. As a sales rep or SDR, your expertise needs to be not in sales technique, but in your buyer. That takes the lift off of sales technique. So if they come in and say they need something and you're like, awesome, and then you sell it to, you're like, well, we sell that. You start talking about the features or the benefits, et cetera. Like, it's a good marker to you that something's wrong. The goal of obtaining the information, this is going to be a doozy. The goal of if I could be real with y'all on the line for a second, most of the problem, in my opinion, with the entire sales community and selling as a profession, and it's not sellers' fault. We've been trained to do this for thousands of years. It's how everyone's always done it. If the goal is to sell, then your questions are going to be, best case scenario, leading questions. That's the problem. If your goal is to sell, if that's your number one thing in your head, then your questions are going to be, how do I ask these questions in a certain way to make the buyer realize something you know, to where they see that they have to have my product. If you just shift the goal to, I need to diagnose, that is the goal of this conversation, then you'll find that your questions start loosening up. You start asking questions all in root of understanding what's happening. And as a result, your sales numbers will skyrocket. So even if your goal is just, I want to blast out quota, I want to book as many meetings as I can, I want to go to President's Club, be the hero of the universe, you know, queen, king of the universe, whatever. The way to get there is to diagnose your prospects. So the root of the term objections, I know this is an objection handling webinar, but the root of the term objections is you are on the offensive, trying to sell them, trying to close them, trying to talk well about your product so that they buy it. They feel it and they throw an object up in your way to slow you down from that agenda. So the more that you're getting objections earlier in the conversation, certainly on prospecting calls, but in discovery calls, it's a litmus test to you that they don't trust you because they know your agenda. So the goal of the goal of obtaining the information should be, you know, ultimately to help them to diagnose. So if it's after, I'm just after getting some pain to kind of twist their mindset into believing that they need to buy, then it's a good marker that you're pain-centric selling. You struggle putting together a list of competitive differences, another litmus test that you're pain-centric selling. I see most vendors struggle with this. Like, how do you differentiate? And they cannot give you an answer. Even I've gone straight to the CEO. They cannot really definitively give you an answer. If I had to guess why, it's because they don't know the products, you know, that the competitor possesses. But point being, if you struggle with that list, then it's a good litmus test that you're pain-centric selling. And if the last one here is going to be a doozy, if you rely on, seek out, and use selling techniques, by and large, they're techniques to manipulate the person, to get them to open up so that you can sell to them. I feel like this is a very honest webinar. Maybe it's because the chat's disabled or I can't see it. Even if you stack up in the chat, I can save it afterwards. I can't see it now if you're lighting me up. But if you're after selling techniques, I see sellers by and large are like, I want to learn the perfect way to say this or thing to say to make the person feel heard or feel understood or feel like they can open up. But the goal on the back end still is to sell. And so your buyer can feel it. The problem I have mostly with pain-centric selling is it can work. It can manipulate your buyer. And I don't think sellers are malevolent. If you're doing this and you miss a root cause or you misprescribe, you didn't want to hurt your buyer, but you did. So a great example of this, I'm going to go into this for just 30 seconds here, and then we're going to transition to the difference between pain and problem. But I talked about this on the tour, but I recently set out to run the New York Marathon. I actually got to do it. I finished on November 6th. And the reason that I did that was because my mom was a runner, very good runner for 30 plus years, ran the Boston Marathon and qualified for it in her 60s, ran the Dallas White Rock Marathon and came in third in her age group. First and second place were Olympians, former Olympians. She was a heck of a runner. She'd kill me for saying this. But she goes out one day and she twists her knee. She went into a doctor and she called me first. She said, I'm experiencing, a little bit of pain. I said, go to the doctor. So she goes to the doctor. She said, hey, can I get an MRI to see what's going on? I twisted my knee. He only asked a couple questions. And then he said, you need to do these exercises. Just do these exercises. She's like, okay, you're the expert. Goes home, does the exercises. And she calls me a week later. I'm actually in more pain now. And I'm like, okay. She's like, what should I do? I said, you should go back into that douchebag doctor and tell him that you're experiencing more pain and that you want an MRI. You want to see what's going on. So she does, and he reassures her, hey, no, you just need to do more exercises. Do these exercises for longer, do them for 3 weeks, and then you'll be fine. So she goes home and she does them. And as a result of that, the punchline is she can never run again. Ever again in her life. Because he misdiagnosed what was going on with her. And so because of those exercises that she did, that in one case scenario are a solution, to her, it means that she can never run again because she did them. So point being, the goal should be, how do I find the problem, the root cause, so that I can get there. I really need to speed up. So we're going to be, more quick here. Problem-centric selling, a good marker that you're doing this, and this is going to be a hard litmus test for people, but you know what your buyers are metriced on and the common challenges that they run into. You could spit them verbatim. You're unable to do discovery and demo on the same call. That's a good thing. It means you're problem-centric selling. If you're unable to give competitive differentiators until you've done discovery, that means it's very likely that you're problem-centric selling. Your disco calls last 45 minutes. You ask your buyers to bring data points back to a second call that you need to help you diagnose. You don't rely on sales technique. You don't get objections from your prospects. And here's the last one, and it's a catch-all. If you're worried about being credible or building rapport, it's a good example that you're not problem-centric selling. So I'm not after looking credible. I'm after being credible by uncovering the things that they don't know about. So those are the good litmus tests for problem-centric selling. So I'm going to go for about 7 minutes here to the difference between pain and problem. And we're going to close out with the problems that you can solve. So difference between pain and problem from a high level is pain is anything negative in the present. Could be annoying on a scale of 1 to 10, could be a 9, could be a 1, could be a 3, and there's pain everywhere. There's pain in everything. It's painful for me that I can't see everyone in the chat, for instance. That's a pain for me. It's a negative experience in the present. A problem is anything, a set of conditions that someone wants to solve or solve for. So the differences between those, the impact of that difference is all pains are not problems, and all problems aren't painful yet. So all pains, negative experiences in the present, I'm not going to do something about. So for instance, I can't see on the chat, but I haven't done something about it yet. And all problems aren't painful necessarily yet. So we're going to get into some examples of those problems. But this, to me, is why outbound, by and large, prospecting is broken. Because we're outbounding based on pain. We're like, do you run into these top 3 pains? The reality is, if the pain was egregious enough to someone, they would do something. They would have already done something about it. So, if I hurt my leg badly enough in the middle of running, I would stop and go to the doctor. But if it's just a slight tinge, I'd probably keep going. So what that means for outbound is we're banking on that we're going to run into the slim, and I mean razor slice slim part of the market that has a pain that's big enough, but hasn't quite done something about it yet. And our numbers reflect it, unfortunately. I'm seeing an average of 0.5% reply rate, 0.5%. And that's just reply rate, not even booked meetings, positive reply. That's, unsubscribe included in it. If I had to guess why, it's because if the pain was big enough, they would have already done something about it. They would have already inbounded and sought you out. So when does a pain become a problem? A pain's going to become a problem in two case scenarios. Either number one, the level of acute pain in the present is so high that it's unbearable. Or number two, the level of impact, if I don't, is unbearable. So a great example of this is I had an iPhone 8. I think it's in here. Here's my iPhone 8. I had this for billions of years. And the pain that I had was I lost charge extremely quickly. Take like 3 or 4 hours, my phone's dead. But I didn't solve for it for the longest time until September. I went ahead and I made the plunge and I bought the iPhone 14. And the reason was the level of pain didn't change for me. What changed for me is the impact if I didn't, because I wanted to run the New York Marathon. So I lost charge and I'd go on 45-minute runs or whatever. But if I lost charge in the middle of a run, not a big deal. It's only 45 minutes, not a big deal. But the impact to me with the marathon is if I lost charge in the middle of that, the impact was way higher. I couldn't be able to listen to music. I couldn't find my dad afterwards. And I thought that that might gravely impact me being able to finish the marathon. So in the first case scenario, the level of acute pain has to be high enough. I lost charge in 3 or 4 hours, but that wasn't high enough for me. If I had lost charge in 5 minutes, I would have solved for it. That would be the acute pain in the present is high enough. But what changed for me wasn't the level of pain. What changed for me was the impact. So the second case scenario is the impact to me that happens if I don't solve for it has to be high enough. So again, beforehand, it was never high enough until that marathon. And I'm like, that marathon's going to happen. And so this is a great example of I had no pain in the present when I purchased. The pain was a hypothetical pain in the future, right? So the only two case scenarios someone's going to solve for a pain is it's the level in the present's high enough of pain in the present's high enough, or the impact if they don't, then they're going to make the trigger to solve for it. A problem can be one of three things. It's actually one of four. Slide's outdated. It's outdated because I add stuff in. So when it comes to pain, a problem is goal to do one of three things: either alleviate the pain in the present, prevent a definite pain that you know will happen in the future if you don't solve for it, or avoid a potential pain that you're not sure is going to happen, that you think is likely to happen in the future. Those are three examples. So when it comes to pain, these are the three problems that we're going to solve based on it, meaning it's going to become a problem in these two case scenarios. But this is what the problem that we're solving is set to do: either alleviate the pain in the present, prevent a definite pain in the future, or prevent a potential pain that's likely in the future. So in my case scenario with buying the phone, it was number 3. I didn't know that I would lose charge in the middle of the marathon, but I thought it was likely, it was potential. But again, the impact was high enough to me of that happening, and the likelihood was high enough to me of that happening, that I said, I have to make this purchase. When you're selling, you're not just selling based on cost. You're selling an entire change. I don't know if anyone's read Jolt Effect, but it's going into all the differences between essentially status quo and indecision. The difference being status quo, the Cliff's Notes are, status quo is the buyer told you that they're good as is, but the lion's share of deals are lost to indecision, meaning they told you actually that they were going to move forward, that their current state wasn't tenable anymore, but then they didn't end up buying. And if I had to guess why, it's because the main price tag behind change, behind buying something, is not the monetary value. It's the impact if what you bought doesn't work. our buyers are terrified of that. If something doesn't work, I have essentially sped up and exacerbated my future impact. If I'm buying, let's say, sales training, because I haven't been hitting quota, and I'm afraid if we don't hit quota, then I'm going to get fired. If I run the credit card and the training doesn't work, I've now lost internal capital, political capital, maybe my team's buy-in, the trust and respect of those around me. So the price tag to people, when people tell you they're going to buy and that their current state isn't tenable anymore, they're then having to go internally and talk to everyone internally and have to plug for the solution that they think is going to solve it. Then they have to go to procurement, then they have to go to legal, then they have to influence other stakeholders internally. So the price tag, if I had to guess why, they're ghosting at that point. It's not because they don't want to solve the problem, or that they think that they shouldn't solve the problem, or the pain's not high enough. It's that they're not positive that your solution will solve it. So they're marching through the gauntlet of all of these reminders, and the price tag is raising in their brain of what happens to me internally. The more I go on record about this, that this is my decision. If I get it wrong, I'm going to be in hot water. So that is what we're trying to, counteract, essentially. But how we do all of this is by building expertise and being able to diagnose the things that they don't know. If you can't help me understand the things that I don't know, sometimes the thing that I didn't know is what I thought the root cause was is wrong. Sometimes what I didn't know is a statistic that actually my problem that I wanted to solve isn't solvable. Sometimes what I didn't know was that actually, generally speaking, even though I have a problem that I want to solve, it's a problem that every single other team is running into. So net, I'm actually doing about average. And sometimes what I didn't know is that I have a whole freaking problem that was impacting me that I wasn't aware existed. So that's where you're going to win credibility, is not by, trying to talk about the boat picture in the background, trying to build rapport. Rapport, it's so often, from what I see, misdiagnosed in the market. People are like, build rapport at the beginning of the meeting. The term rapport is a French term, and it means to be brought back. And if I had to guess what we're being brought back to, it's that our buyers and us are on different teams. The buyer's trying to buy as few products as they can to solve their problem at the lowest price tag. And we're trying to sell as many products as we can at the highest price tag to get there. Their goal is to solve their problem. Our goal is to sell more stuff. And so we hold back information from one another. So rapport is bringing yourself back to their side. Their side is to solve their problems. And if you're bringing yourself back to that side, that's where you establish rapport. So I'm hunting for in the room problems, some that they didn't know about, some that they did, but they didn't know about the root cause, or they didn't know about an impact that's going to happen to them in the future if they don't solve for it, or an event in the future that causes a problem in the present. But all the information that they didn't know is where you're going to win the most rapport, credibility, whatever you want to call it, good juju with your buyer, because they can feel now, oh, this person's on my team. This person's on my team because I want to solve my problems. And they also want to solve my problems. So I'm going to give them more information. So I want to go into 11 types of problems to solve. I only have 10 minutes. I'm going to go, if y'all could jump into the Q&A. So lame. And tell me if I'm okay to go 5 minutes over. I'm going to talk about the 11 different types of problems to solve. If you have to jump, I'm going to cry myself to sleep tonight, but I'll understand. So the 11 types of problems. Let's start with the first. First is a symptom-based problem. This is they're experiencing pain in the present. Pretty simple. And the problem that they're trying to solve is they're trying to solve for it to alleviate the pain in the present. The pain in the present, awesome. Okay, I got a couple people saying yes. Okay, thank you for the extra time. Didn't realize the time. So symptom-based problem, it's where they're coming in based on a symptom. A symptom is subjective in nature. You can't test for it. Only they know it. And the patient has to notice it first. That's what a symptom is. And what they're solving for is to alleviate the pain in the present. They have high pain. They need to alleviate the pain in the present. So there's two types of change that are going on. You're trying to change usually a lagging indicator, like hitting quota. But how you change that is by changing something else, a leading indicator that's adding to it, that's making that problem incur. So if I want to change quota attainment, then I need to change, for instance, the way that I'm sending emails. But what you're trying to achieve here in all cases is to either avoid a potential impact, future impact, prevent a future impact. Basically, if it's a negative future impact, you're trying to not have that impact happen. And if it's a positive one, which we'll get into in a minute, you're trying to make that happen. But it's all about future impact. That's what you're after. So symptom, I've got pain that's high enough in the present. And what I'm trying to solve for is to alleviate the pain in the present so that I do not run into the impact of not solving for it, is that the symptom persists. It probably will get worse. It will spread into aggression, and the implication on the back end. So this is the impact of not solving for a symptom-based pain correctly. So here's an example. I'm going to send this deck out afterwards. These are all actual real clients of mine, but this is a prospect, that inbounds and they say, I want to talk about sales training to drive more quota attainment. And the problem that they want to solve for is that they've missed quota for the last 4 months. The impact was, they thought they might get churned. A sign-based problem. A sign, the difference between a symptom and a sign medically is a symptom is something the prospect notices. It's pain-based. A sign is something that is not pain-based, that the doctor notices. That's an indicator to them as the expert that there's an underlying condition that the prospect doesn't know about. These are the most deadly conditions because they can go on and progress unannounced medically. So this is why you go in and get a physical, for instance, at the beginning of the year. So to do this, essentially, to understand this, these are extremely valuable problems. The reason they're valuable is they're valuable to your prospect because they didn't know they existed. Great example of this is I oftentimes ask my prospects about their inbound line. One of the biggest unknown problems that I've seen is that people don't realize that from what I've seen after looking at thousands of programs, anywhere from 6% to 25% on the high end of people who request a demo actually get a first discovery call. So let's argue 35% are unqualified. You couldn't sell into them, wrong role or whatever. That means best case scenario that I've seen, orgs are churning 40% of their inbound leads because of process. So I'll ask my prospects a question. I'll say, hey, and it's a non-pain based question. I'll say, hey, can you tell me about your inbound process? And they're like, oh, well, we round robin the leads. And in my head, I'm like, oh, there goes 50% of their leads. And they'll say, okay. I'm like, so you round robin them. I'm like, what happens if I inbound on like a Friday night at 7 or on a Saturday? They're like, oh, well, we wait for our SDRs to follow up on Monday. I'm like, oh, there goes another 25% of their leads. And then I'll say like, okay, well, once they do talk to them, what's the goal of the conversation? They're like, oh, well, they're trying to ask some questions to better gear for the demo. And I'm like, are they BANT questions? Budget, authority, need, timeline? And they're like, yeah, they're BANT questions. I'm like, oh, there goes another 15% of their leads, 10 to 15% of their leads. I know that that means that they have a problem, but they don't know that that means that they have a problem. So these types of conditions, what you're solving for is to remedy the condition that they didn't know about. And the impact of not solving the problem is that it persists, or there's a higher impact in the future, spreads in terms of span of influence, but essentially the impact here, the impact that you're trying to solve for, essentially, and the difference between this and a sign-based question, or I'm sorry, a symptom-based problem, is a symptom-based problem they knew about, sign-based problem they didn't. Third is a threat-based problem. This is a problem that someone's trying to solve, and what they're trying to solve is they're trying to prevent a potential threat from happening in the future. So there's no pain in the present for this one other than fear. Their fear is that the threat will become true. Someone's going to solve for a threat-based problem only based on one of two things: the likelihood that it will become true, or the impact to them if it does become true. So the impact of not solving this, essentially what would happen if you didn't solve for it or solve for it incorrectly, is the threat does become true. That's what they're solving for. They're trying to solve to avoid the threat. So in this case example, prospect comes in wanting to train their team on discovery calls. And I said, why? It's asking their quota. Like, what's your quota? And let's say they said it was 100K. And I'm like, where are you at? And they're like, on average, 100%, 20% of quota attainment. Then I'm like, then why are you here? Why do you think you need, sales training? I'm like, well, we've gotten several indicators that our competitors not only are gaining market share, but their discovery call is really good. We got essentially a lead discovery call, and we're afraid that if we don't improve our discovery calls, then they're going to take more market share, and it's going to get so aggressive that it's going to be too late for us to do anything about it. So it's a threat-based problem. They don't know if it's going to happen, but they're afraid enough. They think it's likely enough, and the impact is high enough to where they're like, we're going to solve for this now. So this is a solve for problem. Symptom-based is it's a solve problem, solving the pain in the present. Threat is I'm solving for something tomorrow that might happen. So when you think about questions on a math test, they say, okay, there's 20 questions, there's 20 problems for you to answer, and it says solve for why. Rearrange the things in the present to solve for the problem. So that's a threat-based problem. Goal-based problem, this is a neutral problem. So a goal-based problem is they have a goal in the future. Let's say they're building a team for the first time. The goal is that they have to rank the team to, whatever, 1 million, ARR of quota attainment. And so they're rearranging things in the present in order to get there. This type of problem. And so you can see the implications of if you're pain-based selling, because in this case scenario, there is no pain yet. There's pain if they solve for it incorrectly. When I'm walking into a math test, there is no pain yet. There's pain if I get the answers wrong. So what they're solving for is, how do I rearrange things in the current state to achieve my goal in the future? And the impact of not solving for the problem is they likely have a definite pain in the future. So example of this, prospect comes in wanting to improve their discovery calls. And they essentially do that because they're trying to solve for a piece of quota attainment. And they believe that if they miss it, then they're going to run into some pain, but there's no pain yet. Number 5 is a future metric-based problem. A future metric-based problem is there is a metric that's coming into place in the future. They have no pain in the present. They're solving for it, so it's a neutral problem. And the pain enters if they get the answer wrong. So a great example of this is actually a client pretty recently came in and they said, like, hey, we want SDR training on personalization at scale. I'm like, so walk me through it. So what's your goal, for instance? They're like, well, our reps are metriced on, they have to book 15 outbound meetings a month. I'm like, okay, or 50 meetings in total a month. It was a hybrid. I'm like, okay, so where are you at for the year? And they're like, we're actually at 22 meetings on average per rep per month. And I'm like, okay, so why do you need sales? Why do you need SDR training? You're past your goal, And they're like, well, we are for now, but our goal is going to raise to 30 meetings a month in February. This is a true story. He said, our goal is going to raise that we know at SKO to 30 meetings a month. So we're at, 22 divided by 15. We're way past quota for now. But if we don't learn how to get to 30 meetings per month by February, we're going to, starting February 1st, missing our quota, and we don't want to be stuck solving for it then. So this is a neutral problem. They're changing their things in the current state in order to hit the future metric that comes in place. Difference in that and goal-based problem is a goal-based problem is the goal they currently have. Future metric-based problem is it's a metric that's coming in place in the future, that they're definite, they're positive, will come in. There's a difference between a future impact and a future event. A future impact is something that happens to someone, positive or negative, if they don't solve for the problem correctly. A future event is something that is going to happen in the future that causes someone to start solving for it now. So another great example is I had a client come in and they couldn't release the information, but they were solving for, or this is, a future event-based problem, very similar to a future metric-based problem. An event is coming in the future that makes them solve for it now. So great the example I had in my head was there was a company that came in and they said, hey, we want SDR training. I said, okay, so what's your metric? The gig that I did in discovery. And they're like, okay, well, we're at, 15 meetings a month and our goal is 10. We have a lot of pipeline going through AEs. I'm like, I'm confused. So why do you want sales training? They wouldn't tell me. And apparently I was in a bake-off. It's me and 5 other trainers, global trainers, very well-known names. And I could not tell why they wanted sales training, but I could tell that they really, really wanted it. I'm like, but they're past their goal and I couldn't figure it out. And I'm like, fine. I sold it to them. And they closed. And then they said, awesome, sign this NDA. And I did. And they said, we're going public in 3 months. And yeah, we're good against our goals now, but we think this number is too low. And when we go public, I think the market's going to agree. So they were solving for an event that's going to happen in the future. I was solving for the marathon that was happening in the future. There's no pain yet. There's only pain if I solve for it incorrectly. So the impact of not solving for this is that the potential negative impact becomes true. That if I hadn't bought the phone for the marathon, as a future event-based problem, I hadn't bought that phone for the marathon, then I potentially would have got to the marathon, run the race, got to hour 2, my phone kills off. I can't listen to Taylor Swift and I burst into tears and walk off the track. So I'm solving for it now, but this is to be in a condition to avoid a potential negative impact in the future. Okay, 5 more minutes. Thanks for sticking with me. 7 is a prescription-based problem. You're going to see these a lot. Prescription-based problem is they tried to solve for it already, and it wasn't successful. The difference between this and a symptom-based problem is they're going to be more fired up. They're going to want to know more information from you, and they're less sure that you can solve for it because the first person couldn't. So they had an original problem. They couldn't hit quota. They ran the credit card on another trainer. It's a true example. They're like, my team's at 50% of quota. And I'm like, you sound really, really heated. It's because they had already bought another trainer and it didn't work. So they have less budget than before. They've lost political capital. They've lost internal capital. Their reps don't trust them now as much. So they have to be laser sure, not that their problem needs solving, that you're the one to solve it. The reality is with the problem, with the whole status quo conversation, they're not sure that the problem is going to cause the future negative impact. So they have to be more sure that you can solve for it than they are that they'll get fired if they don't. And it does become true. That's what has to happen. So prescription-based problem that you're going to see quite a bit is they bought other stuff and reps didn't ask them questions and they didn't solve for the problem. So now they have to solve for the problem, but they have a shorter leash and the impact is ever impending right there. So that's a prescription-based problem. A lateral-based problem is they solve for the first problem correctly, but it created a new one, created a new problem. And I'll give you a very heated example. I had the iPhone 8. I bought the iPhone 14 so that I could run the marathon, so that I wouldn't lose charge, so that I could run it, you know, be fine. And it did solve that problem. I did not lose charge in the middle of the marathon. Listen to T Swift all the way through. But what it did cause, it's a new iPhone 14. If you're a runner, you'll know it all too well, is when you accidentally hit it too much, the screen gives you options to shift the home screen. And it's really annoying. And if you're a runner, it happens all the time if you're holding your phone, which I do. So that happened so much throughout the course of the marathon that it locked me out near the end for an hour. I'm like 10 minutes away from the finish line and it locked me out completely because I had hit the incorrect password or something too many times. I get through the finish line. I don't know how to eat during marathons because apparently I'm a child. I did drink a lot, but I didn't eat. I crossed the finish line. What I didn't say online, I saved everyone from. So I crossed the finish line, went over to the side, and my dad was there, but I couldn't call him. And because I didn't eat, I was feeling it so bad that I sat down on the ground and I'm like, something bad is happening with my body. I don't know what it is. I just looked down and my arms are like ghost white. And I'm like, I can't call my dad. So I thought in my head, one of three things is going to happen. Either my phone's going to run up on an hour and I'm going to be able to call him. Someone's going to see me and do something about what they see, or I'm just going to die here in the grass. That's what I thought. Thankfully, someone did find me, threw me over their shoulder, took me to a medical tent. I was there for 3 hours. Apparently, because I didn't eat, my body temperature spiked down to 89 degrees. I entered into the realm of hypothermia. They had to put salt blocks underneath my tongue. I don't remember much of it. They plugged my nose, made me drink Gatorade for 3 different rotations, apparently. I don't remember any of this until I came back to that I was conscious. That entire time, in the bouts that I was coming back online, all I could think was, my dad has no freaking clue where I am. He's at the finish line. He has no clue where I am because my phone has locked me out. This is a lateral base problem. It's a side effect. Yes, my new phone did solve for, I was able to listen to Taylor Swift and get through the finish line. But what it caused was, I'm like, I'm going to die. Ripe young age of 36. And my dad won't even know where I am. So this is a lateral base problem that you're going to see all the time. It solves a problem that they said, but it creates another one. Amelioration based problem is a problem that they are past their metric. Now we're getting into positive problems. They're past their metric. We only have 3 left. They're past their metric, but something just bugs them and they want to make it better. I had a leader come in and they were past their metric. They're like, I want to make my emails better. And I'm like, why? It's like, they just bug me. Another example, when I first started, I deployed a process that drove 70% more conversion on inbound lines. That's why I'm so heated about the problem of demo request conversion. When I started solving for it, because the process was just so stupid that I couldn't handle it. Was it going to cause a positive uptick? I didn't know. I just couldn't handle it anymore. So I solved the problem with the new process. So the point is, this type of problem, they're past their metric. There is no pain in the present other than what's happening just bugs them and they want to make it better. Good arguably good kinds of leaders will want to do these problems. They're like, I'm past my metric, but I just want to make things better. I just want my reps to be more educated. I just want to yada, yada, yada. So the impact of not solving the problem essentially is a problem keeps going, you know, but it just bugs me. It essentially bugs me. I don't know if there would be a positive increase, but I'm assuming that there would be. And it makes the person feel like they are a bad steward, you know, with their resources, because they're like, here's a problem and I haven't fixed it just because, you know, I'm not the type of person that does that. Number 10 is an opportunity-based problem. This is a positive problem. They see an opportunity in front of them that's positive and they want to solve for it. And the future impact that they're looking to drive is not negative, it's positive. They're like, I want to buy this lotto ticket because I think I might be able to win $1 billion. Now it's going to be based off of the likelihood of the opportunity actually being inherited and the impact if they do get that opportunity. But what they're solving for is to rearrange their current state in a way that essentially seizes the opportunity. So the impact of the future impact of solving the problem correctly is that they get a positive future impact. The impact of them not solving the problem or not solving it for correctly is that they don't obtain the opportunity and they might have some negative like feeling about that, like FOMO, I missed out. You know, so great example of this, you know, is I had a buyer who was past quota and they're like, but our cold emails essentially aren't converting. They were booking them all on call. So they wanted to get their emails better because they thought, hey, we can even further exceed our metric here, you know, for this opportunity. So think of it like a lottery, but the lottery, the reason usually most people don't buy it is they don't think it's very likely that they can get the opportunity. So this is a positive problem. They're solving to inherit the positive future impact. It's going to be based on how likely is it to happen in this case scenario too. And what is the impact if they do get the opportunity, if they do get the $1 million, if they do get the, you know, whatever it is, what can they do with that? How does that impact them positively? It's going to dictate whether they're going to solve for it. And the last one is a success-based problem. So think of this like, for lack of better terms, more money, more problems. They're way past their metric and the volume of their success has created a problem that they need to solve for. Here's a great example that blew my mind that I hope will blow your mind as well. The entire industry is using BANT. They're like, yeah, I'm going to ask my buyers, do they have budget, do they have authority, need, and a timeline? Which again, we've covered need. Need is just a self-prescription off of a self-diagnosis, but I digress. BANT was created, most people don't know, BANT was created by IBM. And it was created in a time that they had so much business that they needed to qualify buyers out. They're like, we have 200 bottles of water, we have 2,000 people who want it, and we're in the desert. And they wanted to qualify people out. And we're still using it today. So on a side note, unless you're in the place where you have so much pipeline that you need to get rid of people, that's the case scenario that BANT was built for, is to get rid of people. Like, you have money, you the buyer, awesome, run the credit card kind of thing. So the success-based problem was IBM had so much success that they had to change their current state. They had a problem that they needed to solve. And the problem they needed to solve was, how do we get, you know, how do we basically get people to buy more quickly because we have so much business, get people out because we can't service them. So a great example of this is I had a marketing team come in and they're like, hey, we have way far exceeded our metric. So we want to buy you as a consultant to figure out how we can do that faster because we don't have enough headcount. Great problem to be solving, but this is the last type of problem. So in summary, if you forget everything, which I understand, I talk way too much, the chat was broken. The punchline's this. There's a difference between pain and problem. Pain is anything negative in the current. problem is anything you're going to solve for. And if you're selling based on pain, not only are you losing and leaving a lot of things for yourself out, all the rest of the problems, you're also leaving a lot of things for your buyer out and could potentially be hurting them because you're solving for the incorrect root cause. And you aren't giving them a heads up on an impact that they didn't know about, that you actually did know about because of the style that you're selling. There's only one tip, and it's change your mindset to how do I properly diagnose problems for my buyer's sake, and then for my sake in turn. So once you do this, I think you'll see an unbelievable lift. I've heard time and time again, people say, I don't want to be salesy. I really don't want to be salesy. And I'm like, then you have to, I'm going to cut the screen share here. You have to try to stop it. Like, the goal can't be to sell. The goal has to be to diagnose, to truly, truly help your buyer. And once you make that shift, I think that you'll feel less salesy as a result. So this is everything. Something that I would recommend before you bounce. Don't bounce yet. Don't log off the line yet. I would go, I've built all of this. This is, first of all, this is one of 3 webinars so that are set up on the site currently. I actually have like a sneaky 4 coming in January. Don't tell anyone. Point being, this is one of 3 webinars. If you'd like to come to the other 2, we're going to go into symptom versus sign, and then we're going to go into the questions that you can ask to basically problem-centric sell. But the other thing that I would stress is I built all of this work, everything that you saw today, off of, I don't know if you've heard of him, but Keenan, in a book called Gap Selling. He was the first to uncover the difference and the understanding behind that problems were different than pain. So I would absolutely stress and recommend that you buy Gap Selling if you haven't, and give it a read. He's rowdy, he's loud, you know, but what he understood was the first of his kind. So if you haven't bought that book, I would definitely recommend that you give it a read. I do not get any upside or bonus for this. I'm genuinely expressing it out of the bottom of my heart because of how much it did for me. So thank you so much for coming, everyone. Now I see the chat. Thanks so much for coming. We'll send the deck out and the recording out afterwards. Happy prospecting, happy selling. Appreciate you jumping on the line. And as always, I know it's cheesy, but may the odds be ever in your favor. I've been watching Hunger Games too much recently. So thanks for coming, everyone, and I'll talk to you soon.